Great. Thank you very much. Well, let's call this meeting to order at 10:33 a.m. on September 18th, 2024. We do have some feedback.
Hold on 1 second.
While Kaylin's working on getting us set, I'll just say thank you very much to my fellow council members for making our meeting virtual today. I'm very sorry I couldn't join you. And it's just because I didn't know I was going to be a member of this committee until a week and a half ago. And I already had something I had to be at today. So thanks for being flexible.
What's that? Awesome. Oh, there we are. So how did we get in there?
Kaylin's muted.
Okay, we're good to go.
Good. All right. So now we'll actually call the meeting to order at 10:39 a.m. on September 18th, 2024. Does anyone not have a copy of the agenda in front of them before we move to approval of it? Great. Everybody's got the agenda. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda as written.
And I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Next thing, we got approval of the minutes from which I am recused. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes? From the last.
Motion to approve minutes.
I'll second that.
All right. And then if I can just hear the votes from the two of you.
Aye.
Great. Minutes approved. All right. Next order of business, we got election of the chairman. I have spoken to both of my colleagues here and expressed my interest in continuing Alderwoman Tierney's position as chair of this committee. So I think that's me putting my name forward, and I'd like to hear from either of you if you'd like to put your name forward to be chair.
Mr. Alderman, I move that you be nominated as chair of the Finance Committee.
A second.
Thank you very much. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. There we go, guys. We're moving right through this agenda. Let's keep the good work going. All right. We have a bunch of supplemental appropriations here. I want to start by saying, I don't have any questions about any of these. I've looked through them and am ready to approve all of the supplemental appropriations. Do either of the other older people on here, older women on here, have any questions about any of the supplemental appropriations or concerns that they'd like to address?
Mr. Chair, we generally take each one individually.
Yes, I understand.
There is someone in the online, for example, the first one from APD, they can give us a brief overview and then we can make a motion.
Yes, I understand, Alderwoman Finlay. So my hope is that we can, because we have a packed agenda here, that we can address any that we have concerns or questions about initially. We'll dig in as deep as we need to with each one of those, and then we'll hopefully just approve any of the non-controversial ones as a block. So that's my question. Does anyone have any particular questions or things they would like to go over for any one of these in particular?
Well, I'd ask a question of SA2 of Captain Miguez, I think, is online, about whether this is a supplemental grant. We generally get funding from the state. This seems like a small amount. So I'm looking at the notation. Generally, it was 25,000, and now it goes up to 31,000. Could I ask Captain?
Yes, I'm Captain Miguez, Administrative Services Division Commander for the Annapolis Police Department. This is part of the Police Recruitment and Retention Grant that the Governor's Office provides. We applied for it, asking for $111,200 for that fiscal year. We were only approved for $25,000. Subsequently, we ran out of money for things that the grant is used for. Like the grant is called, they were for police recruitment and retention purposes. So we asked for supplemental funds in the third quarter. We asked for 9,000 additional. They gave us 6,000 additional. So we ended up spending that whole grant for that year. So this is what that 6,000 is. We asked for more. They gave us a little bit more.
So will we ask for additional funding in the fourth quarter?
Well, no. So the fourth quarter is over. So we asked
Oh.
for the additional money for even to go back to Q2 for some things we were not able to cover. So one of the things the grant covers, for example, is a bonus for officers who use a second language as part of their duties. They have to provide proof that they used it for a police service. It's actually in the union contract that if we don't have a grant that covers this, this is something the union wants to bargain. So it's an incentive for officers to not only use their language skills, but also it's usually, it's additional duties that they're taking on to help with this translation. So for this current fiscal year, we asked for more again, and we got a little bit less than we asked for, but more than last year. I'll have to pull up the actual numbers if you're interested.
That's not necessary. I was just wondering whether this was an addition, and I think you've explained it. Madam Chair, I'll move that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 225.
Looks like
Thank you.
Jody has her hand up too. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna recognize Jody first.
I'm sorry, I don't see a raise your hand option at the bottom of my screen, so I don't know how to get anybody's attention officially. I just wanted to clarify, Captain McGuinness, this is extra funding for FY25.
No, it was extra funding that was granted for FY24.
Okay, so FY24 is over. We don't change the budgets for FY24. And so there is no need for the supplemental. We get the revenue in. And you've already, we cannot increase the budget. I don't know how we're going to work it through the records to show that we have the extra funding. We can't increase a budget for an FY24 grant.
Well, may I ask a question? I have my hand up.
Yes, of course. Recognize.
We clearly spent this amount of money in 24.
We've spent it, and now it's just a matter of where do we show it in our records. We have the budgets for the grants set up separately, and when we get these supplemental grant pieces, we will increase the revenue and increase the spending appropriation, and then move the expenses out of APD's regular operating expenses and over into the grant expense account. But being past that date now, we wouldn't increase any budget for 24. So we would need to, Katie and I and the budget team, we're going to have to figure out how we show this from a financial statement perspective. We can still accept the revenue, but physically changing the FY24 budget is not something we would do at this point for anybody. Katie had their hand raised. Katie, did you want to add to this at all?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure that I understood that this was 24 money, and we probably wouldn't have drafted it if we had the full picture. So I can say that there's no need to physically increase the budget at this point for this item.
Thank you, Jody. I believe there's a motion on the table to approve SA 225. Do I have a second to that?
Second.
Excellent. All right. All those.
And Madam,
you raising your hand, Alderwoman Finlayson?
yes, I am. My question is for Ms. Dickinson. Does that mean that this essay is not necessary?
Correct, and I would suggest that the committee withdraw this for consideration.
The committee cannot withdraw. You guys can just take no action.
Okay.
Well, we have a motion on the floor and it's been seconded. So should we vote it down?
I think you can just withdraw your motion, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Withdraw the motion, but not
Okay. I will withdraw the motion to support SA 225.
Excellent.
And I
Thank you.
apologize for the
Thank you very much, Ms. Dickinson. All right, moving on. I again want to open the floor for any questions or concerns on any of the remaining supplemental appropriations. again, with the hope that we can move these as a block. Seeing none, I motion that we,
Miss-
is there one? I'm
Sorry,
Go ahead, Alderwoman O'Neill.
I do have, I guess it's a question about SA 825, the AIPC contractual services, and I understand that it's our standard procedure to go ahead and allocate the leftover funds from 2024's budget. And perhaps it's a discussion for another committee or future. But I do have some concerns about the operations of AIPPC. And again, perhaps it's a better discussion in another forum, but that's my only question about that particular essay.
To whom was your question directed, Alderwoman O'Neill?
I have serious concerns about how our AIPC is operating. The fact that they have leftover funds. I'm hearing from constituents that the process is overly burdensome. It's not transparent, and it's unclear how decisions are being made on constituents that are requesting funds from AIPPC. So I just want that on record that I have serious concerns about that particular commission, and am hoping to have further conversations with our admin, their city manager.
Thank you very much for making sure that's stated. I share many of your concerns, and I know we were also discussing in the Housing and Human Welfare Committee on Monday if it might be more appropriate to change the split of how some of the, I believe it's the hotel revenue tax gets appropriated currently between the Art and Public Places Commission and the rental improvement fund. And we were discussing if, given the huge need for improving our rental properties and the fact that AIPPC has funding left over, perhaps there might be a better split for that. So yes, I share your concerns. I appreciate you bringing those up.
Question.
Yes.
I think we're talking two different things. Ms. Dickinson, am I correct in reading this that AIPPC had 121,000 left over from fiscal 24, and this SA simply moves the fund balance into the 25 year, and thus allowing them to have
Correct.
access to those funds?
When we established the budget, we projected they were going to have $35,000 left, and we appropriated that already, but they actually had 121,000 more than we had estimated. So we're adding that to their budget for 25. And I will add, any change in the percentage we give to AIPPC requires state legislation. So I just
Yes.
wanted to remind everybody about that.
Mhm.
Thank you for that reminder. And yes, I think we're all in agreement that this is not something that we're going to change with this supplemental appropriation. But I do appreciate Alderwoman O'Neill bringing up the concerns. Are you raising your hand with another question, Alderman Finlayson?
Well, I would like to make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to SA 8. I think it'll be duly noted that there are some issues amongst the committee and how they function, and what is determined by city code as to what their function is. But that's not the purview of the finance committee. So for our purposes, I would move approval so that the fund balance does go into their budget for 25.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to second that motion. Seeing no further discussion on SA 8, a motion on the floor to approve it. I'd like to hear all those in favor. Aye.
I
All right, SA 8 has been approved. As a reminder, we still have supplemental appropriations 3 through 7 and 9 under consideration. Does anyone have any questions about those supplemental appropriations?
Well, Mr. Chair, I object to lumping them all together because none of them are they're all unique in their own right. For example, SA9, I would like to hear from the mayor's office or some representative. I guess Ms. Buckland could speak to how this funding is different from other federal funding that we've gotten for EVs in the city.
Sure. Alderwoman Finlayson, would you be supportive of at least a motion to approve supplemental appropriations 4 through 7, which are all Maryland Department of Transportation grants?
Yes, with the caveat that I would like to hear from the director if there's a question or something he'd like to share with us on any of those essays.
Mr. Director, do you feel the need to share anything with us?
Good morning, everyone. Mark Smore, Director of Transportation, and Kwakudua, Deputy Director. We have nothing else to share with essays 4, 5, 6, and 7, unless there's any questions for us.
We appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. I'd like to move that we approve supplemental appropriations 4-25, 5-25, 6-25, and 7-25 all at once.
I would just like to clarify that we are actually giving a favorable recommendation of these to go forward to the council, and I will second that.
Thank you, Alderwoman O'Neill, for clarifying my language. All those in favor of approving supplemental appropriations 4 through 7, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's cover supplemental appropriation 3-25. This is for Public Works. Any questions or concerns about this one? All right, seeing none, I'd like to motion to approve supplemental appropriation 3-25.
Mr. Chair, I'll move favorable recommendation, but I would like discussion. I'd like to hear from the director.
Excellent. Okay, so I had already moved it, so I'll consider that a second from Alderwoman Finlayson, and we'll move into discussion for supplemental appropriation 3-25.
Is the director or someone from DPW available to answer the question? We've had some concerns about the roadway project, particularly in Ward 8. And the fact that other communities have been removed from the schedule because there was lack of manpower, I understand, to do all the other projects and to take care of this BG&E project in Eastport. So how does that help the rest of us? Not to not accept this funding, of course, but are we going to then be able to put the communities back online who had been originally scheduled for roadway improvements?
Marcia, is that a question you're able to address?
Actually, no. I can address this essay, and it is, you know, we have a program where we work with BGE, who, as you know, is much larger than the city of Annapolis, to follow their projects where they, especially gas lines, are, you know, very important to keep up to date, and they're really aging in the city. But we can certainly get back to you. So this essay is just to accept the money that BGE is paid for that program. But I don't have the specific answer to your question, but I'd be happy to get it for you.
That would be great. I just want to be clear. My question is, now that we've gotten this funding, and whether, question one is whether it's supplemental funding, and how is it being allocated in order to pick up those communities who were taken out of the schedule for resurfacing and the like?
So basically, this is replacement funding for what we've already spent. And I will have to talk to the project manager about, the schedule. This money should be available for funding of other projects now, and I will actually have to ask her about those projects because I don't have the information. But hopefully, we'll be able to just move ahead with everything because now we have this funding available for other projects.
Well, I'll be very specific. Bywaters was the community, and it wasn't a BG&E decision to take it out of the schedule, but it was a department, a DPW decision to take it out of the schedule. And I understand it was because of lack of funding and lack of manpower. So I would like to make sure that that gets back into the schedule. It was promised years ago, and just a cursory job was done on Royal Street, if you recall, but all of Copeland Street was supposed to be done in 24-25, and they're out of the schedule completely. So I'm being very specific so that when you look this up, you can know which direction to go.
Okay. I will get your answers and we'll let you know.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Is there any additional debate or questions on supplemental appropriation 3-25? Seeing none, I'd like to motion for, tell me if I'm saying this right, Alderwoman O'Neill, recommendation of approval,
Favorable recommendation.
favorable recommendation for supplemental appropriation 3-25.
Correct.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Oh, I think there was. You're right. Yes. So we'll move to voting on it. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Supplemental appropriation 3-25 is approved. Last one we got on the agenda in terms of supplemental appropriations is SA 9-25, a grant from the mayor's to the mayor's office from the Department of Energy.
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve that or recommend it with a favorable report?
I did have a question about whether this was additional funding for EVs from Department of Energy or whether this was an initial grant fund.
Alderwoman Finlayson, this is the one that I reported on at the Environmental Matters meeting last week. This is a voucher program that was set aside, funds that were set aside by the Department of Energy through a program they have for energy infrastructure for jurisdictions, and the amount that DOE set aside for the city of Annapolis was $76,480. But the city does have to apply for it, like a grant program, when the city has applied for those funds. So it was not part, if you're asking if it was part of the budget, no, it was not part of the FY25 budget. This is a grant program. We had to apply for the funds, if that's your question.
Okay, I guess you mentioned a voucher program.
Right.
So this amount and only this amount is to be used in the voucher program?
Yes. So we are applying to use the amount for which the city will be reimbursed by DOE for energy infrastructure, and the amount that we are applying to use these funds for EV charging infrastructure and battery backup for that infrastructure. If you would like additional details about exactly what we applied for, Dylan Lakonich, our environmental programs coordinator, is also, I believe, in attendance here, and he can tell you exactly where we are applying to put in that EV infrastructure.
Well, I don't want to belabor it now, but I think it would be helpful if you provided us with that backup information, how this voucher program is being used and where.
The exact locations, you need that information?
Yeah, I think all the aldermen would be appreciative of knowing whether.
Was the application, Mr. Lakonich, was the application provided to the committee?
I provided finance the application, and I do not know if they forwarded it that way, but I can definitely send it to the older men and women.
I thought it was provided to the committee. Yes. Yeah.
Well, if you would resend that, because obviously I didn't see it. So
Okay.
that would be
Can do.
great. Thank
Happy
you.
to do that.
Of course.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gill and Mr. Lukonich. Is there any further debate on supplemental appropriation 9-25?
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of SA 925. Recommend
you.
approval of.
I will second your recommendation for approval. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Beautiful. Made it through our supplemental appropriations, folks. I think it was only 25 minutes. All right, next up
We
we
have
got
a fund transfer. Isn't there not a fund transfer on the?
fund transfer is right up next. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I just didn't want to forget about it.
No, totally understandable. Yes. So next on consideration is FT-2-25, our fund transfer to, I believe, to the Department of Public. It's in the Department of Public Works. And this makes a lot of sense to me. Essentially, we're shifting around some funding, as I understand it, to make sure that our ARPA money goes out the door by the deadline. I think it's 2026 is the ARPA funding deadline. So I will motion for favorable recommendation of FT-2-25. Do I have a second on that? And then we'll get to ask questions.
Second.
Excellent. Alderman Finlayson, you look like you were about to ask a question.
Well, yes. I guess my question is, I just need Ms. Dickinson to explain the transfer of funds. Because we're transferring from the capital reserve fund. So why, and what's the balance left there?
Okay.
And why to the federal grant revenue?
Okay, so what we're doing is we're just, these are two capital projects, and we're switching out sources. We're moving $1 million of ARPA from one into the space planning project, and then we're taking $1 million of the capital reserve that was in the space planning project and putting it in the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative project, because the space planning project is going to move forward in a timely way so that we can use those ARPA funds up by the deadline. And the Eastport project is slower at moving along. So in order to make sure we meet that deadline, we're flipping these sources between the two projects. So it's not an overall increase in the capital reserve fund.
Okay, or decrease as we're transferring it from.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, so it's not really a decrease from the
Correct.
capital reserve fund.
Correct. We're just switching them out from project to project.
Okay, then I'm good with that. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to FT 225. That may be already on the floor.
Yeah, I believe that was on the floor. So, Alderwoman O'Neill, do you have any questions on this, or are you ready? All right, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Fund transfer approved. And now we're moving on to legislation. And our first item on here, the tenant displacement fund. I spoke with the primary sponsor, and he informed me he's working on some amendments with the Office of Law. He asked that we postpone this legislation. So I would like to offer a motion to postpone.
I'll second.
Excellent. All those in favor of postponing this, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Moving on along, we have the issuance of general obligations bonds, general obligation bonds and bond anticipation notes, O-15-24. This seems like one of our more complicated pieces of legislation. So I'm hoping that we can have our finance director just give us some explanation of this to start out.
I will be glad to. I see Alderwoman Finlayson's hand up, but this is an annual ordinance that we put forth to the council to give the finance director the authority to sell bonds, to issue debt, sell bond, whether it's bonds or other types of debt, to complete the capital projects that we have already programmed either in FY25 or before. I mean, if we haven't moved forward timely, we may have some prior approved bond authority that we haven't used, but this gives me the authority to issue that debt if I believe that we're going to need cash from bond funding. So the schedules, it is a large piece of legislation, but a lot of it is just legal language saying if we do issue debt, what the debt's going to look like, what forms we're going to use, what are some of the things that we have to do when we issue debt. And it gives me the authority to issue all of the bonds that are currently programmed if all projects went forward timely. And the critical pieces of this are the exhibits that are at the end. The first exhibit lists all the capital projects, all the sources in those capital projects. We are currently sitting on some bond proceeds that we issued the last time that we issued bonds that haven't been used. So we reduce our requirement by that amount, and the net amount is 44 million. I want to let the question go forward because Alderwoman Finlayson, you're waving your hand around like you desperately have something to say.
You know, I'm afraid my camera's in an awkward place.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But I do have a question, and that is about the Buckley Amendment.
Okay. I will explain that. So I first drafted this ordinance and the exhibits in the late part of June. And when I did that exhibit 1 did not include all of the amendments that the council passed during the June capital amendment process. And typically we don't have changes to the bonds in the capital project. But as you know, this year there were a handful of changes to projects that affected the bond funding in a few of those projects. So I had to go back and update exhibit 1 and update the number totals that are in the ordinance itself. There's 3 places where that total 44 million shows in the ordinance, and we had to update that amount. So that's the only purpose of that amendment, is to get those final council amendments put into the bond ordinance so that we have all the authority we need for each project.
Okay, thank you. You know that it raised the flag because it's
It's just we asked the mayor to introduce it because it's coming from the administration.
Yeah. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
I don't know if anybody has any other questions about it.
I
We do
have a
it
question.
regularly every year. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to sell bonds. In fact, I may not need to sell bonds this fiscal year because we have a significant amount of leftover proceeds. And selling bonds at this point with the interest rates as high as they are, I'd probably want to hold off and see if they could go a little lower before I issue debt for anything. So we're going to try not to issue any debt in this fiscal year. But if we
You
need
might
to,
as
this
well
would
at least
provide the
wait until
authority.
later today.
Yeah,
I said you might as well at least wait until
I've heard
later
that.
today.
And it may happen occasionally over the next few months, so we would want to put off any issuances as long as we could.
So this $44 million is this the total amount of bond that the city is allowed to hold on its balance sheet, or is that per this upcoming fiscal year?
No, we already have, I think the last time I looked, it was about $60 million of general obligation, general fund bonds on the balance sheet. This is the authority for additional bonds. And if you look at that exhibit that is attached, if you were to finish all of our projects that are listed in the capital project, in the capital program right now, we currently have unused 75 million of authority, but we have already issued 31 million of that, and we're sitting on the proceeds. So this 44 million is the net we would need if all projects move forward in 25 and we spent every dime of it in 25. And so, yeah, we've already got a significant amount on our balance sheet in addition to this, but this would just be if we finished out all the projects in 25 as they're programmed, which isn't likely to happen.
Thank you for the explanation. Are there any more questions from either of my colleagues?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to 01524.
Second.
Excellent. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good, moving right along. We're on to R-14-24, City of Annapolis Plastic Bag Reduction Act fines. Understand this plastic bag ban has had a long history here. We're just setting the fines, but I also believe there were some questions about implementation. So, enforcement rather. So, either of my colleagues want to go first with any questions you might have on this? Yes, Alderwoman O'Neill.
Thank you. So I know that this was on our agenda back in July, and we did postpone any decision on it. I believe that was the meeting that we had asked some questions, and Deputy Manager Giles got back to us. Thank you very much for that, Jackie, that you got back some of the information. We were questioning how it was being rolled out through the county and what the fine structure was in the county. And it seems in our best interest to follow that kind of structure. And apparently still to date, is it true that they have not issued any fines for any infractions?
Yes.
Okay.
I double checked as of yesterday. There have still been no citations issued in the county.
Okay. I think that was our biggest concern, was how, if there were establishments that were receiving a bunch of fines, or were they just going through and giving them warnings, and how we were going to run that enforcement. And I appreciate the fact that you gave us all those additional details last week. So thank you.
You're welcome. So as a recap, so initially when I spoke with a couple months ago, several months ago now, when I spoke with county staff who are running the program, they said on their hotline, they have a telephone hotline and an email where residents and others can access information. There was, a little bit of a flurry of activity when the ban was first implemented in the county, with questions about, how does it apply, and if there were violations or not to check out. And they said 10 or so inquiries and suspected violations, which they either answered questions or investigated. They said most of them were not violations, and other instances where they were maybe a violation, they just provided some education and gave a warning, and then there were no need to issue citations. And so they said in the last 4 or 5 months, there have been absolutely no inquiries and no suspected violations. And this is something that the county adds on in the any food establishments such as grocery stores, restaurants, et cetera, as part of their investigations as a health department sort of add-on. And they have had no reason to issue any citations since this was implemented in January of this year.
And I have one more question in regards to that. So the fiscal impact note on this says that you are responsible for enforcement.
So I am, or my designee. So I spoke with Director Jakubiak about this, since planning and zoning, as most of the enforcement capabilities in the city, and reluctantly he agreed. He said that, for lack of a better place for this to fall, they do have the staffing there. They're set up to have a hotline and to receive inquiries and follow up on them. So he said that they probably are the best place in the city and best equipped for these kinds of inquiries to come in and for follow-up. They do the same with the polystyrene foam ban. They're the designated department to follow up on inquiries and complaints for the polystyrene foam ban. And he and I did discuss that, perhaps if I do am I finally able to hire for the environmental associate position that was approved in the FY25 budget, perhaps that person could then take on some of these environmental enforcement for the environmental ordinances that we're passing. So we can re-examine that going forward once I have that position approved. But right now, Department of Planning and Zoning would take on this function with a hotline and an email addressed to which inquiries and suspected violations could go.
Great. And I'm sure that we'll be including that in our marketing efforts as the band comes into play.
Yes, it would.
Thank you.
You're
That's all
welcome.
for me.
Thank you very much for those questions, Alderwoman O'Neill. I had similar ones, so I'm glad you got them covered. Alderwoman Finlayson, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. One of my questions from the last meeting had to do with enforcement. And my first question is, how many people in the county have the charge of enforcement? What department does that fall in? And how many people do they have who are responsible for this?
So in the county, it's Department of Health with regard to the food establishments. So that would be grocery stores and restaurants. So that comes to a hotline, a telephone number, and an email address in the County Department of Health. The other one is in the permitting department. So that would be a Department of Permitting, which we don't have a separate Department of Permitting. We have that within our Department of Planning and Zoning. So that's the most similar department we would have to the county. So that would be their retail establishments. So anything non-food related would go to their Department of Permitting. So it's a lesser amount of business establishments. So they have an email and a telephone number for the food related businesses, and then a separate email and telephone number dedicated to the food related. So there's a separate person that picks up those, and that person would have other duties as well in their enforcement. So there's a person, but that has other duties as well in each of those departments.
Well, I guess my concern is we often approve changes to the city code and we assign it to a department, and then we don't give that department adequate resources to do the work. We hear frequently about lack of inspectors, lack of enforcement. So here again, we have a new ordinance, and we are trying to figure out where the enforcement piece goes. And I'm sure Mr. Jakubiec is not going to say no, but what's the reality of his department taking on one more area of enforcement? You have given us data about how others are handling it as far as fees and fines are concerned. But I'm still not seeing how we're really going to implement it. How we're really, we heard at the Environmental Matters meeting last week about the need for communication. And I think I heard you say that there was additional efforts being put in place to do mailings or some form of communication. So where are we with, getting more information out to the community? And particularly once we determine the fines, how that, will be implemented.
So this is the last step. Once the fines are passed by City Council, we can go forward with our communications on the plastic bag ban. We can put it out on the city's website, social media. We can do it in the newspaper, and we start communicating this through other means, through other public meetings and through ward meetings as well. But we will also, what we mentioned during the Environmental Matters meeting last week was that we have a fund of money that we're going to be distributing for free, especially in disadvantaged communities, free bags for people to bring to when they go shopping. So they have reusable bags that the city will distribute to them. And we'll be educating people around those bags, providing information at the same time. And you're right, we pass legislation, but we don't add additional staff when we do that. We've had several pieces of information, the gas-powered leaf blower ban, we had the polystyrene ban, we've had now the plastic bag ban, but we don't provide additional staff. And then we work within the existing staff to enforce the bans, to provide education, and anything else that's needed around the additional legislation. So we work within the staff and the funding that we have to do this unless this legislation provides for more.
Well, I just wanted to be noted that once again, we are adding an additional responsibility without the adequate resources. And maybe some note needs to be made that revenues that are generated by the fines be dedicated to a staffing source. And that's something we should be doing for everything. So I know that's not something that I can amend this legislation, this fine. But I just want it noted that, you know, once again, we're adding more to an already full plate.
Thank you, Alderwoman Finlayson. Your concern is noted for the record. Do we have any other discussion on R-14-24? I don't believe we have a motion on the floor, so I will move that we recommend R-14-24 favorably to the full council. All those in favor, say
I would
aye.
second.
You need a second?
Thank you, Alderwoman O'Neill. Yes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Moving on to itinerant merchant sales in the historic district. And I've got a big question on this because I want to be supportive here, but I'm confused. It appears to be us approving something that already happened. So I'm wondering if one of our city staff can speak to how that's shaking out. It's for August of 2024.
That is a good question. I think this was originally, let me check my records. I don't know if this ended up sort of being a little bit of a victim of timing, because I believe the initial legislation was introduced when that would have been in the future.
Right. And I see it doesn't look like we have Felicia on here who prepared the report. Is there a reason to do anything with this if it's approving something that's in the past?
No.
My read of this is that it does not allow this for the future. It's just allowing something that has already happened or perhaps was not able to happen because we did not approve it. So I think we should, I guess we don't need to postpone. We just need to move beyond this and leave it.
We can take no action.
Yeah, take no action. All right, then
There was a hand raised.
Oh, I'm
Katie?
sorry. Thank you.
Katie, did you need to say something?
I just wanted to add that in Legistar, it says that it was adopted by City Council on July 8th.
Okay, great. Thank you, Katie. Well, then let's unless anyone has any suggested action, which I don't know what that would be, let's agree to take no action and move on to R-43-24. Updating the fee schedule for elections, and I will open the floor for any questions or concerns on this one. No questions, no concerns. This, I believe, if I remember correctly, this comes out of our election reform task force.
That's correct.
So, excellent. So, all right, seeing no questions or discussion, I move that we recommend approval of R-4324 to the full council.
Second.
Excellent. Again, seeing no questions or concerns, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. We're running right through our schedule today, folks. Next up is R-4424, fund authorization for the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis. And I know we considered this also in Housing and Human Welfare on Monday night, and it was not approved. One of the, I guess, co-sponsor, Alderman Gay, encouraged us to add a amendment that would require these funds be spent by, I believe it was either November 1st or November 30th of 2024. And city staff said that they do not feel like that is necessary. So I'm supportive of moving this as it stands. But I'll open the floor for discussion. I see Alderwoman O'Neill's hand is up.
Thank you very much. I am in the process of offering an amendment to this. I think that it is important that we don't just shift these funds into HACA, and that the city maintains the funds, and HACA is working against, with invoices against the funding. I don't believe that just handing over the $500,000 is in the city's best interest in light of transparency and everything else that we have questions about with HACA. And so my amendment is going to be that HACA being able to use their established contractor, the contractor would be issuing invoices against this amount to the city and not transferring. This would not be a fund transfer to HACA.
And Alderwoman O'Neill, is that amendment ready, or you're still in the process of developing it?
I have just formulated the words. I was waiting. I tried to attend Monday's meeting, but I had to leave for Housing and Human Welfare, and have been trying to connect with Alderman Gay over a couple of questions I had about it. So hopefully that will be in effect sooner rather than later.
Sure. So Alderman Finlayson, I see your hand up, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. Alderwoman O'Neill, your preference is that we do not move this legislation today because you would like an amendment on it, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Alderwoman Finlayson?
I agree with the direction Alderwoman O'Neill is going. I guess my first question is, what was the need for a timeline that Alderman Gay recommended?
I would defer to city staff on that.
I'm not sure I can speak to his intention, other than certainly, and I'll speak for myself, but I think this is a representative of Director Jakubiec's view as well. Planning and zoning and HACA have been working very closely together, meeting every week for a long time, to really develop a good, deep partnership around addressing some of these issues and getting, working to get as many units back online as quickly as possible. And so I think that from the city's perspective, I'm not sure there are advantages in delay. The details around how that money gets transferred and what kinds of units, that some of those details have been under discussion, and I have no particular, and obviously Ms. Maddox Evans can speak for herself, but I have no particular indications from our side that that the agreement that they've been working on together is somehow insufficient to the task that everyone is working toward together.
So all that being said, is this funding needed immediately, as was suggested by the sponsor? That's my first question for you, Ms. Buckland. And my second question is, can the planning staff handle the oversight of allocating these funds on a project by project basis?
I have, again, I have faith that in the crafting of that agreement, that Director Jakubiak has kept in mind his staff's capacity.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from either of my colleagues?
Thank you, Ms. Buckland, for that.
I'm sorry, I felt like an answer that was not particularly satisfying for you, but
no, you answered it. I, as I said previously, our directors are awesome, and they will try to do everything we ask of them. And sometimes, realistically, it gives them additional challenges that I'd rather not put on their backs.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think that given how personally he has been involved in all of this, I think my take on it is that he has a clear-eyed view of what that partnership has taken and will continue to take, and that he is supportive of the agreement that they've been working on.
Okay.
And Ms. Buckland, I know we talked about this on Monday, but I think I speak for the whole committee in saying we would love to see that agreement whenever it can be shared with the.
So the thing is, the agreement, go ahead. I see Jody's hand up.
As we're talking about these changes and requirements and the timing, I wanted to mention that the original amendment that set this fund up had $250,000 of ARPA funding in it, and $250,000 of one time. So that may be what's triggering Alderman Gay's urgency of committing the funds. Although, all we have to do within the timeline of the ARPA funds is commit the money to something in the form of a purchase order that can be done in the form of a grant if we were doing it the original way we're contemplating it. If we start doing it paying out as bills are presented to us, we'll have to set up a purchase order for the amount that meets the requirement of committing the funds. And then we can pay it out as as the bills come in. So whatever way we decide, I think we can work it with the ARPA monies, but we have to have something in place by the end of this calendar year.
Yeah. So the regarding the how shall I say this? The agreement has not been finalized. We typically don't release unsigned agreements. Signed agreements are in the public sphere generally, but unsigned agreements are not. And part of the point of this discussion is the policy direction from council that will help inform the agreement. So I have a little bit of concern about sort of the tail wagging the dog in some ways. And that the part of the point of this is the acknowledgement and support of council for the purpose. The details of how the fund transfer happens, how that partnership works on the ground, those are details inside the agreement that it is part of, you know, Director Maddox Evans and Director Jakubiak to work together on to make sure that everyone's needs are taken care of. But that overall policy direction, that's part of what should be informing the agreement, sort of in some sense, not the other way around.
Thank
So,
you.
May
Yeah,
may
go ahead,
I
Ms.
follow
Finlayson.
up? The amendment that Alderwoman O'Neill is contemplating, would that be something that would be embedded in the agreement?
That would inform how that agreement got written, correct?
So should we be approving this ordinance prior to the agreement, or is?
No, it would need, you would, I'm sorry, Mr. Lyles, I saw your hand up.
Ma'am, this is for the funding. The executive action will handle all of the details around how the funding is distributed. And that's still in planning. This particular resolution just establishes the funding at the level required, the 500,000, which is within the council's authority to set budget for different activities. And that's what this is doing.
So should this accompany the agreement?
This needs to precede the agreement.
Ma'am, the council's authority is limited to budgeting for activities that the council thinks should occur. The executive administration's authority is to work out the details and the contractual binding agreements that facilitate the expenditure of the funds.
Okay, I thought I heard you say that there was, or whether it was you or Ms. Buckland, that there was a document coming to us.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so all right, I understand.
Yes, Alderwoman O'Neill.
Thank you. I can't find my hand on the screen.
It's
Thank you
under
very-
more. Look under more. I just found it.
There you go. Okay. I'm used to my computer screen, which is much larger, has everything else. So in a sense, then, Mr. Lyles, you are saying that whether I put the amendment forward or not, this resolution is just us authorizing the funds, and it's going to be up to the administration to decide how that agreement is going to work. So
Correct. And the administration has heard you with respect to the grant delivery of funds, either prior to or after expenditure. But that's something the administration would probably have to discuss with you and determine whether or not it falls within, the time commitments necessary to get the funds transmitted and the activities completed. But that is something the administration could definitely consider. But it's not the purview of the council at this stage with this resolution.
thank you for that. I guess my thought process on the entire thing was that I would be willing to vote and understand the necessity of the funding going to HACA so that we can get these apartments and units back up online in the quickest manner available to us. I just had some concerns about turning over the funds completely without having a check and balance on where they're going.
Well, I think one of the things that we are contemplating, if not negotiating, is what that looks like. And that becomes part of the agreement. How do we account for the funds? How do we monitor the funds? That's all part of really any agreement where funds are being released from the city. This is no different. We would have a panoply of options available to us to monitor, assess, and figure out whether or not the funds are being used appropriately, and to deal with any things that might go awry in that relationship or in that funding.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind in that is that, you know, the city and HACA have been meeting literally every week now for a long time, working on this particular issue. And that doesn't go away when this agreement gets put in place. So I think there's a very tight communication loop at this point. And so there are, I think, lots of opportunities for the city to have, to be in communication and to understand how things are going.
Thank you.
I appreciate. I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Alderwoman O'Neill?
I just said thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. So I think we want to motion to postpone this if Alderwoman O'Neill is planning to offer an amendment. If you're still planning. Yeah.
I will retract that because it sounds like my amendment doesn't mean anything anyway. So
Okay, then I would
time.
move that we. Well, I would very much like to see that agreement so that the city council can have some oversight on this. I would move that we approve this as written.
A second.
All right. All those in favor of issuing a favorable report on R-4424, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is that all three of us? I think so. All right. Let's move on to R-4524. Last thing we've got are procurement fees related to, I won't bother saying the section of the code, procurement fees related to the, zoning, to increase our protest fees. And I did just have a quick question on this because I'm looking at the first reader draft right here, and it says we're increasing the fees. I assume they're increasing. We're changing the fees to $500 for a protest filing fee on offers of $10,000 or more, and $100 for protest filing fee on offers under $10,000. What were those fees before, if anybody here knows?
I can answer that question. They're actually not changing at all.
Oh.
As part of the rewrite of the procurement section of the city code, those fees are currently hard-coded in the code, and the practice in a variety of places and legislation that's been in front of city council has been to try to make sure that any of those fees are actually included on the annual fee schedule rather than being hard-coded and embedded in code. So what that rewrite of that section of code does is simply take those fees out of being hard-coded, puts them on the annual fee schedule. This legislation is the putting it on the annual fee schedule part. So it's actually not changing at all. It's just changing where it's shown and how council goes about approving those fees and puts it in line with how council deals with all the rest of the fees that the city assesses. So it's actually not a change in any of the fee amounts.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Apologies that I evidently misunderstood it. Does anyone have any additional questions about this resolution? Yes, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, I think Ms. Buckland has explained it, but is this relative to the fact that we've just created the Central Services Department?
No, there's no change at all in how the fees are done, who does them, what the amounts are. Literally the only change is taking it out of being hard coded in one section and instead having it go through the normal annual fee schedule. The creation of central services really doesn't affect this part at all.
Well, I know our fees and fines are grouped by department. And now we have a new department in central services. So I just wondered whether this then would be listed under central services as opposed to where it was previously.
So it's a good question. It wasn't listed previously in there. So it's simply adding it wholesale. Just it's adding it wholesale into it, and it's sort of in its own spot. Yeah.
Okay, but a new department, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's affecting how it's listed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any
Next.
additional? Yes, Alderman Finlayson.
No, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other comments, I move that we approve R-4524, or that we make a favorable recommendation on R-4524.
Mr. Chair, I'll move R-4525 if you're giving it a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, I think you just misspoke, Alderman Finlayson. It's R-4524, not 25.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry.
No, that's good. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then we're on to our general discussion. Any general discussion from anybody?
Mr. Chair, I had a cursory discussion prior to the beginning of the meeting about timing for adopt a community grants, as well as I'll now add the regular community grants. And Ms. Dickinson indicated that she would get on that and let us know what the status is.
Yep.
So
I'll
just
confirm that I'll do that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Buckman, it was. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that up, Alderman Finlayson. Any other general discussion? I'll say, folks, that we can talk more about this offline. I may need to ask to move some of our finance committee meetings. I have a standing conference event that I have to go to every other month that generally is Tuesday through Thursday. So we may have to adjust our schedule for a couple in the future, but we can talk about that offline. Last call for any additional discussion. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. Thanks so much to our dedicated city staff for all of your expert advice on these issues. Thanks to Kaylin and the folks running our live stream for making sure that we're actually working and everybody can see it. And thank you especially to Alderwoman O'Neill and Finlayson for being here, helping me through my first opportunity to chair a meeting. Thank you, everybody, so much. And with that, I'll offer a motion to adjourn at 11:51 a.m.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There we go. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thank you.
you. You too.